Hi, everybody. Welcome back to My Boss is a Theater Kid. I am so freaking excited right now because one of my dear friends, Riley Utley, is our first guest on the podcast. Hi,
Yeah.
Riley.
Hi, Katie. I'm so
How
happy
are
to be
you?
here. And I'm so excited for you. This is awesome.
I am so excited. Riley and I know each other from grad school. Oh my gosh, we're
Mhm.
like back in the day. No, we know each other from, we were both in the arts journalism program at Syracuse University. And Riley has been a part of so many of my crazy ideas, and we were in class together, all that jazz. So I'm so excited to interview you. For those of you who don't know, Riley is the weekend editor at CinemaBlend. So, Riley, why don't you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself? Tell us about your job. What do you do? What is CinemaBlend? All of that.
Yeah. So I'm the weekend editor at CinemaBlend, which means I work Tuesday through Saturday. And my job has a lot of different elements to it. The editor part of the job title just means I help facilitate our day-to-day operations. I help post stories, I help edit stories, help ideate stories. I do all of that. I also write a lot. I write 3 to 5 stories per day, news stories per day. And then I also do a lot of interviews. So exclusive content for our site, interviewing actors, showrunners, directors, producers, writers, what have you, whoever's working on a film or TV project. I'll chat with them about anything they want to talk about. And that's kind of the 3 elements of the job I do. CinemaBlend is an online website that is run by TV and movie fans, essentially, and we have a blast covering what we cover. We live on a similar realm of existence as sites like Collider and Screen Rant and CBR and those kinds of online only outlets that cover like all types of film and TV stuff. So yeah, that's the gist of what I do at Cinema Blend.
Totally. It's such like a niche job, which I love, and that's what also makes you the perfect first guest for
Thank
the
you.
podcast. But I definitely want to ask you more about that. Like, what is it like for one, working on like a weekend schedule, like so many like other arts jobs do? And also
Mhm.
like what made you find Cinnamon Blend and what made you want to work as an arts journalist?
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to be an arts journalist like from when I was in middle school, which I know is not normal to know what you want to do when you're like 12 years old. But
Well,
I
I think
was
we know what we want to do, but
yeah, exactly.
change.
I was obsessed, like properly obsessed with the Hunger Games when I was 12. And I that's how I really like fell in love with like being in a fandom, but also the process of how things get made and reported on and journalism in general was discovering this world of entertainment journalism through those movies and how they were made and all that stuff. So that's kind of how I started down my journalism path. And like I'm the biggest nerd on the planet. Like we were talking about beforehand, the wall behind me is like an explosion of my brain and all the things I love.
I
And
love
so I wanted to make a career out of those things. And like I just have always wanted to, I've never really wanted to make the art, but I want to understand how it gets made. And I'm fascinated by all the people who make it. And I wanted to meet them and understand their jobs. And so with that all in mind, I realized journalism was the route for me. And through school, I did all kinds of journalism. Like it wasn't just arts. I loved it all. I realized quickly that like I'm a big fan of news writing, and that's how I found Cinema Blend after graduating from grad school. I found it on LinkedIn. And I applied. I got the gig, and it's been a wild ride ever since. But yeah, working at an outlet like this has always kind of been the dream. Like being in a place where I get to write about what I love on a daily basis, and I get to meet people I never thought I'd meet ever. Like that's the dream. And so the fact that I get to do it is insane.
It's amazing. I mean, and I watched you work so hard to get there. So, like, you are incredible. But
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, actually. So, you said you always knew that you never wanted to perform, that you really wanted to kind of like do behind the scenes, like, or just
Mhm.
not be performing. Did you ever try performing, or did you ever try any other like arts-related jobs or activities, I guess, since you were in middle school
Yeah.
for
I
your
was I was
journalist?
in like band in high school,
Okay.
but I like or in middle school and high school, but I realized pretty quickly that being on the stage just wasn't my thing. I love to just like appreciate art and I love being a fan of things. And so like going to musicals as a kid and like watching TV shows and movies as a kid, it was never like I never wanted to be in it. Like I wanted to learn about it and how it got made. And I've always been an incredibly curious person about the process and how things get done. And that's how I landed on, I think journalism is the right career for me. And I realized that that curiosity expands far past film and TV. Like I'm
Mhm.
easily interested in literally anything. So it worked out nicely for like if because when we were in school, I mean, like getting a job like this is not a guarantee. Like getting to work in film and TV, doing exactly what you want to do is not something that comes around all the time. So I had like made peace with like, I'm gonna work in local journalism, I'm gonna do like hard news reporting, and that'll be that. That's fine. I loved it. And then I was able to like work really hard in grad school and land a job that is in the realm of what I exactly what I wanted to do. But yeah, that general curiosity is kind of what led me to journalism, and it's why I'm still here.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And it really is so hard to like I never didn't realize how hard it actually was, especially in film and TV sometimes, because there are so many people that want to get into the industry, but you found yourself a really niche, I think, opportunity, which is so
Mhm.
cool. Wait, so
Yeah.
tell us more about CinemaBlend. Tell us more about your day to day. You have such a cool job. Tell us more. I mean, you were doing something cool today, but I know you do that a lot. Tell us more about the junkets. Tell us about all of that.
Yeah, I mean my general day-to-day like is I log on, I help ideate our news, I help write a lot of our news, I edit a lot of the news. That's the day-to-day job. It's pretty like cut and dry. That's what happens, and I have a lot of fun doing that. I also get to write a lot of fun opinion-y stuff. Like I just wrote a story like today about what it's like watching the fourth Bridget Jones movies without watching the three that came before it. So like I get to write a lot of really fun stuff like that as well. The really cool part of my job is the interviews. Like
Yeah.
my
Yeah,
dream
this is the
growing
good stuff. Gotta
my
tell us some stories.
my dream growing up was getting to do stuff like that. Like I remember when I got hired at Cinema Blend, I had like made this goal for myself of if I can get myself to a place where they'll let me do interviews, I want one of my first junkets to be the final season of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. That I love that show. It's one of my like favorite shows of all time. It premiered when I was a freshman in college, so I like grew up with that show. And the fact that its final season was airing during my first year of professional work was kind of insane, and it felt really full circle. And that was one of the first big junkets I ever got to do was that. And learning about the junket landscape was like quite the learning curve. I mean, if you're in any field of
Yeah,
journalism, like you kind of have to get shoved off of the cliff and into the water and hope you don't drown. um,
really.
and
Yeah.
and and junkets are like that. They're very fast paced. They're very high energy. You don't have a lot of time to talk with talent. And there was definitely a learning curve to learning that. But getting to do junkets like me, my first junkets were The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Outer Banks, and Daisy Jones and the Six. I did
Oh
all three of them in like a
gosh.
month. And Shadow and Bone, that was the other one. And
Those are
they
like
were
huge titles and
they
huge.
were all so fun and I loved it and I don't know. I had the bug before, but I like really caught it after getting to do those
Yeah.
things. And that was just the start. I've done a lot of cool stuff since then.
For those, let me stop you for a sec. For those people listening that don't necessarily know what a press junket is, can you just explain that really quickly?
Yeah.
Because for all the
Yeah.
journalists out there, it's like they're so exciting, but they can be so stressful. So for all
They're
else,
it's a
what are
very
press junkets?
intimidating event. I it almost feels like you're speed dating.
Yes,
Because
yes, that's a perfect way to describe it.
unlike like if you're working at a local when I worked at a local paper, if I set up an interview, I set it up directly through like the person I was interviewing, pretty much. And I could have as much time as
Reaching
I
out,
wanted to
cold
talk to them.
call,
Yeah,
email, you can find
ex
their info.
exactly. And I'd meet up with them. We'd have like a 15-20 minute chat, and then I'd go back home and write my big story. Junkets are totally different. They're like, you coordinate with a publicist, and it's a giant press day where every outlet is there, and you just roll through each room with the different actors, actresses, showrunners, producers, what have you. And you have usually like 5 minutes to talk to each group. And it's a lot, but it's really fun. And I mean, getting to talk with the talent is like it's crazy and like a dream come true. But yeah, it's definitely like there was a learning curve going from grad school to doing this. That's for sure.
And there's so little time to go
Yeah.
into it. I
Yeah.
remember you. telling all of us, like our grad school group, about all the different junkets you've been on, and you've written so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles.
Mhm.
And I did my first junket, I think 2 summers ago. And I went into the room and I was like, oh my gosh, like Riley does these all the time. Like, this is going to be so much fun. She keeps telling me how amazing they are. And I got in and I had like 30 seconds and I was like, this is so crazy. This is overwhelming. What am I doing? And and it was like a smaller film too, so luckily I wasn't starstruck at all by anything, but it is so overwhelming. So like how do you prepare for something like that? And
Mhm.
what was like your first experience like and what have you learned since then?
Yeah, I love to do as much research as I can beforehand by like, and that is mostly just out of watching whatever the thing is. So like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Um, like, what have I covered recently that I can talk about? Oh, I've been covering Severance, and that show is
Oh,
insane on Apple TV Plus. Um, I got a handful of episodes in advance. When I watch those, I take intense notes and I write down everything I can think of that I think is important. And then from there, I'm able to ideate my questions. And I try not to get too overwhelmed by it all because that can be very easy because there's a lot out there on the internet, especially when you're covering a show that has so much discourse as Severance does.
right.
So I try to stay in my own little bubble of stuff. And if I have enough time, I'll go back and watch the first season. Then I'll watch the new stuff. I take notes, I write down my questions. And with such limited time, the order in which I ask the questions is also really important. So I really figure out how I'm going to prioritize what I'm doing. And that's the very like general process of going through it. But yeah, you definitely can't, you have to go in with a pretty distinct game plan from the jump because you only have a limited time and it goes by like in an
So
instant.
quick. So quick. So then from there, what is your writing process like, especially covering the arts? I mean, we learned this in school, but I think everybody has some sort of sense of like being a critic or writing reviews can be so challenging just to
Mhm.
even write them, but also then being working for CinemaBlend, your work goes out there and millions of people read it every single day. So it's like, what is it like forming these opinions and forming these criticisms for the
Y-
world to see?
Yeah. What's interesting is I have always struggled with criticism and reviews. It's never been something I thought I was super strong at. Like I'm very much a news writer, like deep
Mm.
down. It's what I'm a lot better at writing. Um, However, at Cinema Blend, all of our stories, or most of our stories, mix a little bit of like a personal take with the
Mm.
news. So like because I'm covering like a show like Yellowstone, I'm able to take something an actor said about like them teasing what's going to come next and theorize off of it. That's what I love doing. I think that is so
That's
much
cool.
fun.
Mm.
And so like when I was covering Rings of Power last summer, I was getting the episodes not all at once in like sections. And so I was able to write these speculaty stories to go with my quotes of like, person said this, I think this could happen next, or this is why this is important. Like, this is the significance to this thing. So finding that middle ground of like adding my own takes, my own opinions, my own theories about something, I've been having a lot of fun with. And I think it's not traditional criticism, which we do that at Cinema Blend. Like people write reviews, I've written reviews, and that's really fun. But it's what I do is more so mixing the two things, which is fun. Another example that's not related to interviews is like I've been watching The Good Wife for the first time, and
Okay.
I've been writing a lot about how The Good Wife connects to Elsbeth, which is a show that's airing on CBS right now.
Mhm.
And so I'm able to use my own personal experience watching The Good Wife to be like, I'm watching The Good Wife and Elsbeth at the same time. And here's what I want to see on Elsbeth next because I have all the context of the two shows. So
Oh,
being
love
able to like apply all of that has been really fun. And it's not unconventional because it's very commonly practiced in and entertainment journalism, especially at this level. But it's not something I was familiar with until I started working at Cinema Blend because we were way more into straight news and then like criticism
that.
at in school.
Right. Yeah, totally. Wait, and so what is your what like do you get any feedback from fans who read and like what is your audience like? Because you talked a little bit about being a fan yourself.
Mhm.
earlier. And so what is it like hearing from those fans? And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure a lot of them agree with you, but do you get suggestions from them? Do any people disagree? What is that like?
It's always interesting. I don't get a lot of feedback. Like it every once in a while I'll get a DM or an email, but I love it when people like reach out to me and they're like, "Hey, I agreed with this take." I cover Fire Country on CBS like religiously. Like every single week I cover Fire Country.
Oh, wow.
And I've gotten to the point where like I've interviewed the entire cast like multiple times. Like I feel like we know each other at this point.
I
And
love that.
when I post a story, every once in a while I'll get a fun little DM that's like, "Oh my gosh, I totally agree with like whatever you said about this thing." And I'm like, "That's amazing. That's awesome." And then of course every
Like the
once in a while
best thing to hear as a journalist, honestly.
yeah, it's amazing. And then every once in a while I get the occasional hateful comment or whatever, but you just sweep those under the rug and move on.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it. Wait, so for people listening, or honestly, I hope a lot of like college kids listen to this podcast. So for people who are listening and are like, oh my gosh, she has the dream job. How do I get this job? Tell us about, let's take it back. Tell us about like how you got this. You started in middle school, obviously loving behind the scenes of it all, loving the arts, and how did you kind of make your way to Syracuse and then here?
Yeah. I'm from a really teeny tiny town in Washington State. And there's no national entertainment news happening there. So like everything I was learning about was on the internet, growing
A
up.
lot of good journalists, though. There were a lot of kids
Yeah.
in Syracuse from.
No, for sure. Yeah. And so I grew up in Davenport. I was a big fan of like I watched like Bones, I watched Psych, I watched The Flash, I watched The
Mm.
Hunger Games. Like I was very into this stuff and I loved the people who made it. Like, okay, how do I make this a job? Then I found journalists who I love to follow. Josh Horowitz hosts, works for or worked for MTV and Comedy Central, and now he also has a podcast called Happy Sad Confused. And I listened to his interviews and I was like, yeah, I want to do that. That's what I want to do with my life. So I was like, okay, journalism is the thing. I want to do journalism. But coming out of high school, I knew getting into a place like Syracuse or NYU or Columbia or whatever was not in the cards for me. I wasn't going to get in and I couldn't afford it. Like that was just the reality of the situation. So I ended up at Gonzaga University, which is in Spokane. People know it because it's on March Madness brackets every year. And so when I was there, I was a journalism major and I was covering everything because like I said, I'm down to write about just about anything and I will have a good time doing it. Um
I love
and
that.
and while I was at Gonzaga, I got my first clips in the Spokesman Review, which is the daily newspaper in Spokane, my freshman year. I started working at the Gonzaga Bulletin, which is the school paper, my sophomore year. I was hired as an editor my second semester at the Bulletin, and I was a news editor for 3 semesters. Um, I was never an arts editor while I was there. I was in news the whole
So
time.
interesting. I never realized that.
Yeah, and
Oh my
so I was covering hard news almost all the time, but I was writing about everything. Like I was writing art stories, I was writing sports stories, I was writing opinion here and there. Like I was kind of doing it all. And so I did that. Then between my sophomore and junior year of college, I got an internship at an alt weekly called The Inlander, which when we were in grad school, we worked for an alt weekly in Charleston. So it was a similar vibe. And I loved doing that. That was like the best thing I ever did before I got the job I have now. We got to just they treated us like we really worked there. We got big stories that were published like
God.
on spreads. It was a free internship, but we got
Like it was
incredible
great.
clips because of it. And so
Right.
like the national tour of Les Mis came through Spokane and I was able to interview
Oh,
the
wow.
one of the actresses in it. And then I did that. That was incredible. And then I was like, hey, could I go see the show and like write something about it? My boss was like, yeah, sure, let's see what we can do. That's how I got my first press pass was by doing that.
Wow.
Um, and so that was where I like really caught the bug for arts reporting. And I was like, oh, this
Yeah.
rocks. I love doing this. And then I did that my junior year at Gonzaga. I was still a news editor. Then COVID hit in the middle of my junior year. I was
And
applying to be the
worst
editor
timing, the worst timing. We all
for
have that
real.
story.
Oh yeah. But I was applying to be the editor-in-chief of my paper the semester COVID hit. Like I had submitted my application probably 2 weeks before we got sent home.
Oh my goodness.
And I did the interviews and I was like, they were everything I wrote down felt like it had gotten thrown out the window because at that point we were like, we just have to survive as a paper. Like that's what we have
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
So my senior year, I was the editor-in-chief that first semester, and we were just trying to make it work in COVID. But that was honestly one of the most gratifying yet challenging times in my journalistic career because we were forced to adapt to what we were doing. And also that was the only human connection I got was
Yeah.
that experience. Um, that was incredible. I was applying to grad school at the same time, which was a choice that I made. Um, and while I
My
was doing
God, lots
that,
going on at the same time.
yeah, there was a lot happening. And then while I was also doing that, I had become a pretty consistent freelancer at the Spokesman Review, which was a really great way for me to get fast clips that were legit clips that I got paid for. So that was exciting. There was a lot going on. The other thing about my Gonzaga experience that I tell students about all the time when I talk to them, because like I think people will look at my job and be like, oh, you do film and TV, you write about arts all the time. What art story did you write in school that helped you get to where you are now? Almost none of it. I mean, a lot of it was the most useful thing I did when I was in school was I covered sports. Like covering
Yeah.
Division 1 basketball
Interesting.
is the closest thing I've gotten to what I do now. Because it's so fast paced. You're not talking to the athletes directly. You're moving through sports information directors. Like
Hmm.
it's you only have very limited time with the athletes that you're talking to. So that was, and when you're doing game coverage, you have to turn in that coverage 40 minutes after the game ends,
Immediately.
or it's not relevant. So that was really helpful. That was what I did at Gonzaga. I quickly decided grad school was the move after that because was COVID and I didn't know what I was going to do
Yeah.
next.
Like many of us out there.
Yeah, and like I knew I wanted to go to grad school eventually. Like I love academia and I love school and I wanted to have a master's degree. And
Mhm.
so I applied to a bunch of schools. Syracuse stuck out to me because I think it's one of the only schools in the country that has an accredited arts journalism program.
Yeah, one of the very few. I think
Yeah,
maybe Northwestern has something similar.
something, yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's one of the very few.
Yeah, so I read about that. I knew about Newhouse. Like, you don't go to journalism school and not know about Newhouse. Like, it's kind of hard not to. And so I applied to Syracuse along with a few other schools. And it like really worked out where it was the dream program and they gave me the financial aid I needed to be able to go for it. And luckily, like I think something people don't talk about enough is like the cost of living in the city you're going to school in is really important to consider. And luckily, Syracuse is a
True.
very affordable city to live in, which really helped me feel confident in that decision to like take this leap and go to school.
For
And so I did that while I was at Syracuse. I worked the whole time. I was trying to remember the other day because I figured you were going to ask me about this. And my second semester at school, I had 3 paying jobs and two
oh,
internships.
yeah. I was thinking about this too. I feel like our cohort, which for those of you listening, first of all, shout out to our cohort if you guys are
Hmm.
listening. But at Syracuse in our program, they put us into different cohorts. So we had probably like 10, there were like 10 of us
Yeah.
for something like very, very small number. And we just went through the entire year together. And we all probably if there were 10 of us, 10-ish in our class, we probably had 50 jobs or internships. Like we all
Hmm.
had like at least like or even like 75. Like
Yeah.
we had all had so many jobs and internships between the small number of us. And
Hmm.
I think we all motivated each other so much, which was
Hmm.
like I know you motivated me so much and we all just like helping each other all the time with each other's projects. And so
Yeah.
yeah, shout out to our
It
class.
was incredible. And what
Yeah.
was really great about our cohort was we were all like extremely ambitious, but we weren't competitive with
Yes.
each other,
Yeah.
which was really nice because it wasn't like we all had such different interests that we were all going for kind of different things, which
100%.
was fantastic. But yeah, when I was at Syracuse, I was a TA. I worked at the news house as I don't remember the job title, but it was like
You're an
the
editor, right?
head student manager
You
person.
ran that. You ran that.
Yeah. And
What are you
then
talking about? You literally ran the paper.
and then I did that for a semester. I freelanced for Pop Sugar. I
Oh yeah.
freelanced for Central New York Magazine. I interned at Syracuse.com.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that's everything.
Wrote a couple for Salt City, my little
Yes.
newsletter.
Yeah. And then we also did the stuff for Charleston for
Yeah.
the paper in Charleston. So
Yeah.
Syracuse was fantastic because like any opportunity you wanted was available. You just had to have the ambition to like go out and get it.
For
And
And
like
there are
ask for it.
so many arts opportunities. That
Hmm.
city has so much arts. Like the
Yeah.
arts just bleed through. People bleed
It,
orange in Syracuse, but it also bleeds the arts.
oh yeah.
There's
It's
so much going
incredible.
on.
One of my favorite stories, like to this day, that I've ever written was about like a bunch of sustainable artists who live in Syracuse.
Oh, I love
And
this.
I just got to interview them all about their thing just by like DMing them on Instagram, being like, hey, can I
Yeah.
talk to you about this thing? And they're like, sure, whatever, let's do it. And then I like got to take the photos too as well, which was really fun. That was really great. Like I wrote a big story about Airbnbs, which was really fun. Like
Oh yeah, that was
so
cool.
much cool stuff. In Charleston, we did a photo story about like a sandcastle competition. Like I said, I'm down to cover anything. Um,
But all of
so
that has led you to the arts. And I think
yeah.
that's a huge misconception that people have is that if you work in the arts, if you want to perform and do a different job in the arts, you have to stick with the arts. Like, no, it's art is part of life. It's so
Hmm.
interchangeable. And like all the
Yeah.
things you learn can be
No,
trans.
yeah, it's incredible. And I mean, working in local journalism especially like opened my eyes to just how many different forms of art are out there and how
Yeah.
art is news as well. And when I was in undergrad, our A&E editors would always be like, A&E is news, like A&E is news. And
Yes.
it's true, it is. Like what I do now on a daily basis, like what we're publishing is news. And
So true.
which I love because like in my J school experience, like I'm a news writer. Like that's what I love to do. I'm happy to cover like news, but like when I get to do it for the arts, it's even better. And yeah, so
Yeah.
coming
And
out
some of
of
the top stories, especially lately, have been art stories,
yeah, no,
which
yeah, it's been crazy. But yeah, so it was really great to do that. Then right out of grad school, I got my job at CinemaBlend and I've been here since then.
amazing. Yeah, I just like love, I feel like there's truly is no one path in this
No.
industry or really in any industry, but it's so cool to just reaffirm that through hearing other people's
Hmm.
stories. But one thing I do want to touch on too is you mentioned working in sports, you mentioned photography. I always talk about social media, obviously, with my job, but what do you think is like, what are some skills that are so helpful for you today and to younger journalists to learn? As they create their careers in the arts.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think like this isn't like a hard skill, but it's something that I think is really important and advice that I got once and have lived by throughout is like if you're going into journalism or any career, you have to be willing to ask for what you want. Like
Hmm.
there's when I want an assignment at work, like I have to ask for it. Like it's not they might offer it to me, but if I want to guarantee that I'm going to get it, I have to be the one to be like, "Hey, I want to do this." All my best career moves have happened because I asked for them to happen. Like um getting to go see Les Mis, I asked for that press pass. Getting to cover basketball, I asked my sports editors if I could do it. Like getting it, that's kind of the big thing that I have learned over the last few years that has gotten me to this point, I think. And that's not necessarily a skill, but it is something that has been consistent forever. But in terms of
Totally.
like hard skills, like in what I do on the day to day, like my writing and editing is the most important thing. Like knowing how to effectively research something is really important. This is going to sound dumb, but like knowing how to Google.
So
um
true.
and
Yeah.
knowing like
Doing the most basic research first.
yeah, knowing like how to use key terms effectively to find what you're looking for is like
Mhm.
vital in any form of communications or journalism or research role. So that's really important. Um when I was in grad school. I don't use this as much now with what I do, but I was learning how to do photography and I loved it. Like I still do it as like a hobby, but I think if you're working in local journalism specifically, you have to be able to take your own photos, shoot your own video, edit your own social, like write
Yeah.
your own stuff. Like you have to be able to do it all. It's vital.
And it's all on
And
your phone. And it's all
yeah,
on your phone.
yeah,
Yeah,
and even if you're not doing it all, you should have an understanding of how it's done.
for sure.
Because even though I don't edit my own clips that go up on social, I have a general understanding of what's going to look good on social. I know my content better than anyone else. And I have the slightest idea of how they put stuff together for video. So I'm able to like talk to them about what they're going to post and what might go up and give suggestions and all that stuff. So I think that's a really important skill to have. And also like in the age we live in now, like people aren't, I don't think, like actively Googling news. They're finding it through social
Yeah,
media. And so knowing how to capitalize on that, I think is vital. And I
totally.
mean it for us it like it all depends on audience as well. Like when I cover Outer Banks, I'm like, get that stuff up on TikTok.
Immediately. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas when I cover
Viral
like
immediately doing numbers.
exactly, or whereas when I cover like Yellowstone, I'm like, okay, I need to focus on what's going up on site. Like,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's just about kind of understanding the
Like your
differences of
audience.
where that stuff is going to do the best. But yeah, those are kind of the big things. I hope I answered that okay.
Yeah, 100%. No, I love that because I feel like that's what I tell people too. I'm like, I've realized all of it, the hard skills, even if you're a performer, you still need to learn how to write. You still need to
Mhm,
know how to research and read and be able to speak well to others. You still need
mhm.
to learn how to do your social media because that's
Yeah.
how you market yourself.
Mhm,
Yeah, so I really think it's all so important, really, no matter what role you're in, if you want
mhm.
to market yourself. And of course,
Yeah.
reading is really important. But okay, kind of a fun question. Do you have any like best interview stories or worst interview horror stories that you've had?
Yes, he's actually on my wall.
Yes, show us
That's
the wall.
Charlie Vickers from Rings of Power. He
Okay,
plays Sauron on Rings of Power. That show is the best thing ever. I love covering that show. The cast knows their stuff so well. Like they are so much fun to talk to because they love their show so much. And Charlie Vickers is just a blast of a human being. Like he's this chill Australian guy who plays like the most evil Tolkien character ever. And so he's like down to have fun, like in the interview, which is great. So like even though I ask him like serious questions about the show, like I'm also able to ask him silly things that like might play on social,
the
and I
grit.
know he's gonna
Yeah.
have fun with it. So in the interview that's here, I had asked him, I was scared to ask a question because I had seen memes online about Sauron being like he's like the ultimate like gaslight gatekeep girl boss kind of guy, and which is so silly. Like it's really like I was beside myself when I saw them because it's like accurate too, which is the thing. So I was like, well, I'm gonna ask him about it. We're gonna see what happens. And
Funny.
it was the first question I asked him. So I went into the room. I was so nervous to do it too. And I was like, it was the second time I had met him. So at least that was out of the
Okay.
way. And I was like, so Charlie, I've seen a lot of memes online. And he had so much fun with the answer. And like we turned it into this really fun social clip. And it's edited so well. And it paid off to ask the funny question like in that moment. And then after that, I was able to spin it into like a question about the more serious parts of the show. To this
Right.
day, I think that's one of the best interviews I've ever done. Like we
I
used
love
everything
that.
from it. Like that
And it's
moment was
unique.
so fun.
Yeah,
And
these actors are getting the same exact questions
yeah,
time and time again in these
yeah.
junkets, and that's so unique. It gives fans a different look.
Yeah, it was so fun. I loved it. I want that show to come back so badly. Like I got to interview that cast. I interviewed Charlie 3 times over the
Oh
course of
wow.
this season. And I interviewed a lot of the other cast twice, which was fantastic. My other favorite interview was another recent one. My family is like the biggest Yellowstone fans on the planet. And so
Same.
me getting the
You're
Yellowstone
gonna love
junket,
this.
yeah, me getting the Yellowstone junket was a very big deal to my
Mhm.
parents and to like everyone in the town I grew up in. And so I was so excited to do it. I got to do it in person, which I've only gotten to do. Last year I did 3 in-person opportunities. Like I did probably 15 junkets through the year. I only got to do 3 in person.
Ooh,
Yellowstone was one of them. I loved it. It was I was nervous going into it because like I'm a lot younger than everyone else on the show. And so I was a bit intimidated, but I had seen interviews. I knew they were very nice people.
yeah.
And I'm such a big fan of the show that I knew going in that my questions were like solid, I thought. And so I went in, I was really nervous to interview Cole Hauser and Kelly Riley because they play Rip and Beth. And I was like,
Oh,
oh my
the best.
they're Rip and Beth. They're like the most intimidating characters on the show, but like I love them as actors. And I went in, Cole Hauser like shook my hand and he was like, "It's so nice to meet you." Kelly also shook my hand. I sat down. I was wearing this like leopard print skirt and I had worn it because I was like, "Oh, Beth would wear this." Like this is
Yeah. Oh, I love
a
that.
Beth skirt. And
Yes.
I sat down and Kelly immediately complimented my skirt and was like, "Oh
Oh,
my
it's
gosh, I love
meant to
that."
be.
And I was like, incredible because I wore this because Beth would wear it. And she was like, "You're right." And then I had a 7-minute interview, which is way longer than normal. And
Yeah.
it
Wow.
went so well. Like we had the best chat. Like I got so much good information from them about the show. And it was I mean, I was on cloud nine after that. That whole junket went
Yes.
well. But yeah, that was a big one. The one other one I'll mention because it's still my pinned tweet on Twitter is I did the Ted Lasso junket a couple years
Oh,
ago
for
and
those of you listening, Riley is the biggest Ted Lasso fan.
I'm a massive Ted Lasso fan and
We should post your Halloween picture.
yes. Oh my gosh, yes,
Yeah,
we
you're
totally
dressed
can.
up. I love it.
In grad school, my housemates and I dressed up as Ted Roy and Coach Beard. I was Coach Beard. And
So iconic. So
it was
iconic.
so fun and I love that show. I've seen it so many times. And season 3 came out while I was just kind of getting into interviews at CinemaBlend. What's really like serendipitous about that is I found out about that junket while I was doing the Maisel junket. Like
Oh,
literally I was in the
whoa.
middle of it and I got the email about Ted Lasso. And I was like, "Oh my God, I have to do
Your
this."
dreams. Yeah.
And so that one was like a career highlight because like I that show means the world to me. And I paint my nails to kind of match whatever I'm doing, whatever junket I'm doing. And so I had painted them AFC Richmond colors. And I was interviewing Phil Dunster, who plays Jamie Tart, and he like clocked it. Like he was like, "Oh my gosh, Riley, are those AFC Richmond colored nails?" And I was like, "Yes, they are." And it was awesome. It was such a cool thing. Oh, and then the other thing I want to mention is those are like one-off kind of things, not rings. I got to
Yeah,
interview
they're
those guys a
incredible.
lot. But I love the shows I get to cover on a weekly basis, like more than
Oh, yeah.
anything. Like I have become such a fan of the cast of Fire Country. Like they are the nicest people. I get like these 15-minute interviews with them and I get to ask them whatever I want about the episode that's about to air. And like being able to maintain that relationship has really meant a lot to me. And it's been really gratifying to cover that show from the pilot to they're in season 3 now. So like being on that journey with them has been a real highlight for me as well.
To watch
That's
them kind of grow and get to know them. Yeah.
yeah. No, it's wonderful. And I mean the list goes on and on and on. I really the other like really special one for me was one of the first shows I did interviews for was Mayor of Kingstown, which is on Paramount
Ooh.
Plus. Jeremy Renner is the star of the show. When season 2 came out, it was like a month after his snowplow incident. And so he obviously wasn't doing press for the
Mhm.
show that season. He was healing. So I got to interview other people in the cast and it was awesome. When season 3 came around, I got to interview Jeremy and that was a really full circle moment as well to be like, this was one of the first shows I ever got to cover. Now I get to interview the star of it like a year
Yeah.
later. It was very cool and very full circle.
Oh, I love that. Do you have any like horror stories or bad interview experiences that stick out?
Thankfully, no.
Amazing. Oh my God,
Um,
incredible.
I have
I feel like I
had
have so many from school.
I have I have a lot of very good, at least like at my job now, I haven't
Yeah,
had a horror story. They've all gone well, thank goodness.
that's an expert. That's
When
why
I
that's why you got the job.
when I was in college, um I do remember like I've been stood up by sources before, that always sucks.
Oh,
Um
yeah.
or like sometimes like when you have limited time and you're with someone who isn't like the most talkative person ever, it can be
That's hard.
difficult.
Yeah.
But
It's
I've
all
learned you
learning experiences.
yeah, I've learned that when I go into a situation like that, or to any interview for that matter, I try to really over prepare and write down literally as many questions as I can think of. So that way, if I'm getting short answers or if something isn't going how I planned, we aren't like stalled. Like there's other stuff to get around to.
Yeah, that is actually the worst when you run out of things to say in an interview.
Yeah.
That's probably one of my horror stories when I was in school. I was writing a piece about a performer who had gone to Syracuse, and I was interviewing her professor, and I got told at the end of the interview that that was the worst interview he had ever been a part of.
My God.
And I was like, I mean, it was the biggest learning curve for me because I felt so embarrassed and I was like, how could I have let this happen? I didn't do my research properly. And I knew it too throughout the interview. I was like, this is not good, simply. But it was such a learning curve for me to
Mhm.
have that experience and to grow from it. And now hopefully I'll never be underprepared again. But you really learn a lot. I don't know.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, the best way to learn journalism is by doing it. Like
Mhm.
there's really no other way to, I think, effectively learn it. And I think the only way you get better at it is by trying and flailing and getting through a lot of very grueling experiences.
Yes. Doing it over and over and over and over again.
Literally, it really is like a workout. Like you have to keep doing it to
Yeah.
maintain the muscle of being able to do it because it's a very unique career field to be in, and it's a very intense
Mhm.
career field to be in. And
Mhm.
so being in tune with the process, I think, is really vital. And luckily, it's something I think Syracuse taught us so well how to do,
Yeah.
which is fantastic.
Yeah. Okay, so what is coming up next for you? Any like fun career moves you're gonna make or dreams you have, goals you have, or just things that we should all be watching?
So I think I'm allowed to say on the 20th Reacher comes out. I did the junket for that.
I
And
love that.
I'm really excited about the coverage we got from it. The junket went really well. And I had a blast doing that. That's the upcoming thing. There's also a couple other projects coming out very soon that one of them I did the junket for today. The other one I'm doing over the weekend that I'm very thrilled about.
Amazing.
And that's kind of what's going on right now. My Severance coverage is still rolling. So I did that junket in December. I've been sitting on a lot of content for a long time, and we finally get to roll some of it on Friday,
Oh my God, that
which,
must be so hard to like sit on all that content for forever and then like finally be able to
yeah, no,
there.
it was crazy because I mean, all those interviews happened at once. So like,
Yeah. And it's been
I
all over the news, social, everywhere.
yeah, and luckily we've gotten to run a lot of stuff. Like we've been running stuff every week, but there's a couple things I'm really excited about that we get to run this next week. And I'm really thrilled with how things have been doing with that show, like in the lead up to it. Season 2 is also like excellent. If people aren't watching it, they definitely should be. It's wonderful. And I got to interview Adam Scott and Ben Stiller for
Oh.
it, and I'm like the biggest Parks and Rec fan on the planet. And so the fact that I got to meet Adam Scott, I was like freaking out. Ben Wyatt's like my spirit animal.
I
Um,
love that.
and like I grew up watching that Night at the Museum. So
Mhm.
like getting to do that was really special. So that's rolling. I'm trying to think what else is coming up. I think that's everything on my end currently. In terms of like what I'm watching that people should watch,
Yeah.
um, as I said, I'm watching The Good Wife, which came out 10 years ago. It's fabulous. But it has a spin-off that's airing on CBS right now called Elsbeth
Oh,
that is excellent. It is such a good murder mystery show.
I didn't
It's
realize
like,
that was the spinoff. Okay, love.
yeah, and Carrie Preston is just the best in it. She is so good. I love her. I am also watching um I'm really excited about the new season of 1923.
Hmm.
As we have established, I'm a very big Yellowstone fan.
Oh yeah.
And 1923 is like my favorite of the shows. So I'm really excited for that to come out. We have some fun stuff planned for that show. Um, and
What makes it
trying to
your
think.
favorite out of the three shows?
I think it does it mixes what's best about 1883 with what's great about Yellowstone, and it turns it into like one show. So like 1883 is excellent because it feels like the most realistic of the shows, and it's really brutal, and it's very like they're literally in the elements for the whole show because they're taking the
Right,
wagons from Texas to Montana, or I
right.
think it's Texas to Montana. It's to Montana.
Yeah.
And so it's really intense, it's very gritty. I mean, I can't speak to how realistic it is, but it feels really realistic. Like it doesn't feel as soapy as Yellowstone does.
Hmm.
Whereas Yellowstone is like this wonderful soapy drama
Unreal
that's
storyline.
over the top, crazy, action packed. Like it's awesome. 1923 is both those things.
Cool.
Because it takes place literally like in kind of in the middle. Well, not in the middle, but between those two times. And so
Right.
it's the middle of the Dutton history. You're getting to know the ancestors of Yellowstone, but also the direct descendants of the characters in 1883. It's as a gal who watches a lot of bro shows. I love how romantic 1923 is.
Mm.
And I mean that in a lot of different senses. It's traditionally speaking, it's a very romantic show. It centers around three couples, and in this family. It's also beautifully shot, and like the sweeping epic of the story feels really romantic. But yeah, I love that show. The first season of it is awesome.
Oh, so I can't wait to watch. I'm still watching Yellowstone, getting through it. Oh, my computer just shook. Still watching Yellowstone, still getting through it, but I cannot wait to watch the prequels. And
Yeah.
that's just a live in time arts review right there.
Yeah. Yes. No, yeah.
I loved it.
Oh, and the other thing, this isn't like new anymore, but I got to cover Shrinking this last season of Shrinking, and I
Oh,
think that's genuinely
nice.
one of the best shows on TV. So I highly recommend that show. It's awesome.
Okay, love that. A little bit of
Yeah.
a maybe a hot take. I don't know.
It's
I'll have to
on
watch.
it's on Apple TV Plus.
Okay.
It stars Jason Segel and Harrison Ford and Jessica Williams. It's created by Brett Goldstein and Bill Lawrence, who
Hmm.
both worked on Ted Lasso. So like if you like Ted Lasso, it's very in the same vein. But I think that show is brilliant. It's wonderful.
Amazing. Okay, one last question. What do you hope for the future of arts journalism to be?
I just hope it's full of people who are really passionate about film and TV or whatever art they're covering, because the best coverage comes from people who care about it and who want to cover it and who are excited to cover it, because the artists we're talking to are so thrilled to be doing the work that they're doing. The least I can do is try to show the same enthusiasm back. And like to have an industry that's full of people who are genuinely curious about that kind of stuff, I think makes for the best content, whether that's social or traditional stuff. And I that's what I hope for it. I hope we keep progressing and like leaning into social media because I really love
Yeah,
what outlets are doing with that. And finding a mix of like fun content and informative content is what I hope. I know that's a very generalized answer, but that's the hope. And I mean, I plan on staying in this industry for a long time, so I'm feeling hopeful about it.
no, absolutely. I think for any industry, any job, any activity, anything, if you do it with passion, the best comes out of it,
Mm-hmm.
no
No,
matter
for
what.
sure. For sure.
Okay, so where can we find you?
Yeah, I'm at Riley Utley on Twitter, and I believe my Instagram is Riley_Utley, but let me check that really
Yeah,
quick.
let's double check that.
Yeah, my Instagram is Riley_Utley. That's where all my interview clips get reposted. And my Instagram account is my photography Instagram account is by Riley Utley. You can also follow CinemaBlend, all one word, for all of our news, all of our interview clips, all that fun stuff on everything. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, the just
Absolutely.
our website in general, anywhere.
I love it. I can't wait to read more of your work, and I hope everyone else does as well. Can you leave us with some words to live by, like a quote or something like that?
Hmm. I mean, I think if there's anything to live by, I just want to reiterate what I said earlier about not being afraid to ask for what you want. Because like I really think that has like driven me forward. It has gotten me to where I want to be. Like having passion to figure out what you want to do and like taking the steps you need to take to get there and doing it by knowing what you want and what you need to do that and being having the courage to ask for it, I think is the most vital thing I hope people take away from this. Because I mean, it's single-handedly one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing now.
I love it. That's so wise. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Thank you,
having me.
Riley. You were our first guest on My Boss is a Theater Kid. I am so excited. That was
Thank
amazing.
you for having me.
I enjoyed this chat so much. I can't believe how long has it been? We've had a 51-minute amazing conversation, and I'm so excited about it. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. It genuinely means the world. I think this is so cool, and I'm honored that you invited me on it.
Oh my gosh, anytime, and I can't wait to have you on again very soon.
Oh, yes.
Maybe we'll have to do a gold ring reunion of some sort.
Yeah, there we go. That would be fun.
That would be amazing. Okay, well, everybody, you heard it here first. Go follow Riley. Go follow and read everything she writes on CinemaBlend. Follow on socials. Keep up with all the buzz, and we'll see her again very soon.
Thank you.
Bye.